Hey, welcome back to How Long with Spot. We wanted to talk about something that's really important about the future of our republic and possibly even the future of humanity. But before we get into that, I want to share a story about our involvement in the anti-fascist movement here in Charlottesville. Back in 2016, when Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton won their respective primaries, we realized there was a chance that Trump would win the election. And so we made a commitment to drop all the projects we were working on, all the activists, social justice stuff, and just focus on losing 200 pounds in the space of a year. Now, after about 9 months, we had lost 185 pounds when Donald Trump tried to, or began his efforts to throw the DACA kids off the bus or off the boat or whatever you want to call it. Uh, we had lost 185 pounds. We decided it was time to start focusing on activism again, and we organized the May 1st protest, No Nations First protest, where our symbol with the um, SWAT sticker and an international no sign and No Nation First written on the periphery of that sign, because and we were able to do that to gain that kind of certitude that Trump was a fascist in the making. His practice was fascist because we were aware that one of the natures and histories of fascism was that the Nazis were one of the first people to develop an effective political style public opinion marketing survey network. And they did that because their program was really simple. This whole fantasy, the elders of Sion and the Jewish bankers who betrayed, with the communists to deprive the ethnic Germans of their birthright by sabotaging the results of World War One. All the same bullcrap you hear from QAnon today. Really, the Israelis should like seize the intellectual rights of the elders of Zion and sue these QAnon people for for plagiarism, something like that, because that's really what it is. Um, um, and the reason they could do that is that that and the master race and the other things with it, and what they were doing was they were doing their polls to find out what people thought about the other issues, and then they'd pick their places on issues based just on that, because that they didn't give a damn about that stuff. So they were able to get an accurate poll together. And when I saw how Trump embraced, the whole anti-abortion thing with no conviction at all, but beyond that, it's like, okay, his practice is one that leads to fascism, and that has to be understood. It's his practice. Hitler, he didn't revoke the Weimar Constitution. He passed an enabling act that allowed him to go around it, right? Trump did not do that either. He corrupted the DOJ and fired inspector generals to ensure that it wasn't enforced on him. So that practice has been there right from the beginning of his practice, and one concern right now, what's happening right now, we have, there's something called the bus theory of revolution, the idea that during the French Revolution, by the way, I think it was Professor Fornan from Trenton State, New Jersey in the 70s came up with that. Um, that all these forces united against the King of France, but once he was overthrown, different ones stopped at different things, at different points within the social change. And as each one got off the bus, they became manipulated by the conservative forces, the pro monarchist forces. And so it became this thing that eventually led to the war of the Reign of Terror. And to a degree, we're seeing because before they had this whole focus, and once the king was gone, they didn't have the same alliance, and so you're having this thing right now where you have a significant portion of people who are opposed to Donald Trump during the election and so forth. They're um, people who, because of the COVID crisis, have come to be against Trump, because the crisis was actually in his response to that, and the whole need for Medicare for all. You know, those people who maybe certainly agreed with Black Lives Matter and the idea that, yeah, why not getting shot for being an innocent person just walking along the street? That seems pretty reasonable. But maybe didn't learn that much of the cause and effect. And maybe they're a little bit suspicious of Antifa because, it's outside of their bag. And so they're, and other groups are starting to peel off of this, and they're being manipulated by people who want fascism to survive. Because the thing is, there is a left and a right to every organization, including Nazis. There was a left Nazis. They didn't get retired or resigned. They got funerals basically, but they were there. And the thing is, within the Trump movement, you have a left and a right. Now, the left, and this sounds crazy to us, but that left is the white evangelicals and such. But you can hear it in people's responses that they're going away from, you know, totally renouncing this stuff that they were out on the street, but we were out on the street for a non-violent reason, so we don't take any responsibility. And it's the same line being echoed by the seditionists in Congress like that our thing has nothing to do with it. And see, those people who are on the street, they're worried that a pursuit against fascism as terrorism will result in them being unduly punished. When what we really need is people like Ted Cruz, this Attorney General Paxton, who obviously drove the sedition with his fraudulent lawsuit in the hopes that Donald Trump might pardon him because he's already been indicted. Or Rudy Giuliani, for much the same reason, Steve Miller, who suggested the idea of alternative electors who would actually be fraudulent because they had nothing to do with the political process. All these people are part of an insurrection coup. And the thing is, if you call it that and charge it on that and hold the people accountable for plotting an insurrection against our government, then you won't have to people who are still making it in their minds that it's okay to march to our capital with fascists who are planning to murder and kidnap and execute members of our elected government on the basis that I'm just practicing free speech and I have nothing to do with the people who organized this march. And even though, people have been saying that it was going to come to this, right? Even though the people who are marching with me have been talking about civil war, I'm okay with ignoring that reality and pretending I'm just practicing my free speech by supporting the same fraudulent lies, the same fantasy that the election was fixed, when every investigation into it, every opportunity to demonstrate proof, no one has come up with shown one shred of proof. No, you sign an affidavit, and that affidavit is not presented in court, and you are not obligated to or under the possibility of perjury. That is nothing. That's like heresy, hearsay. And so, those people are still ready to march out again with the same fascists, you know, and with it, when you start arresting, if it just stays on the street level, you fire a few cops, and you charge a few idiots who walked off for a left turn, or dressed in horns, or put their feet up on someone's desk, or defecated their space. Um, whether you charge them with 20 years or 6 months, without actually getting to the root conspirators who manipulated a insurrection into manifestating. If you don't get with them, all they become is martyrs. Look up the beer hall putsch. That's the beginning of the Nazi movement in Germany, the beginning of their movement or offensive against the government. It was as ridiculous and pathetic as what happened last week, if you judge it by the same standard. But Hitler wrote Mein Kampf when he was slapped on the wrist with 5 years in prison for an armed assault against the government. And he was actually there. He actually got wounded, something Trump would not have done. Um, he wrote Mein Kampf. He dedicated it to the fascists who died during that clumsy and ludicrous attempt of rebellion. And of course, that's another thing. Trump wouldn't have dedicated his book to anyone but himself. But that gave them the martyrdoms to build their mythology. And if you leave it at the street level, if it's 6 months, if it's 20 years, they'll be martyrs. They're already started to do that. And, even, Elizabeth from, what is it, Tennessee, who's boo-hooing about the fact that she entered the White House in a planned insurrection and got maced. They maced me. That's crazy. But they'll be martyrs in their own eyes, and it's a victory in their own eyes. And if we don't deal with this as a serious attempt, we have lost. We will lose our democracy. So, if yes, there might be some play on this that to more encompass more needs. Perhaps, Joe Biden right now can promise that if, the Senate part of the impeachment has given him some leeway within his first 100 days, one of the first things he'll do is sign an executive order. Because one concern, it's been the idea that this was an insurrection. It goes back at least to the beginning of November. And all those pardons that Trump did, they did without the standard process of going through a review by the Department of Justice beforehand. So there is a potential of Biden promising to order that review in a modification of an executive order by which those pardons were executed. And if those reviews turn up that they were inappropriate, follow some kind of process toward overturning or revoking them. That's possible. The other thing's possible is just thrust into the Senate right on day one, of that leeway, passing a package more like the one already put in forth by the House way back in spring. And when they rejected, push in the impeachment stuff while the House work out the other thing and then go into it. In other words, we have to use this to push things forward, not just to hold ground in stopping and resisting fascism. That's all the time I have for it. So we'll try to get back to this again someday.